information around queer and gender expansive. I should have said all my shit talking before you hit record. I should have done all the like dirty like secrets, but um and then how do we think about teaching those systems, right? So if I have a robust critique of classification systems, if I say that they are sort of, I'll give you an example. So when I first started working at Sarah Lawrence College was my first job out of library school in a library. I'd worked briefly as an indexer at the Social Science Index, an H.W. Wilson company, which was terrible. Just terrible. Like it was the kind of job. So literally in the job interview, they asked me, "Can you be quiet?" I was like, "Yes, I can. I'm unemployed. I can be as quiet as anyone has ever been ever." Right. And it was tedious work, piecework, right? Like I had a quota, I had to index 40 articles a day. It was the kind of job you either love and stay forever or you stay 6 months. And I stayed 6 months. And I worked at Sarah Lawrence College and I arrived at the campus right when we were finishing up a reclassification project. So they took the library collection and they moved it from Dewey into the Library of Congress classification. Have any of you in your jobs had to do a reclass project? Does it sound like something you want to do? You did. Kathy, where did you do that?
We did it at Henderson State in Arkansas,
Okay.
and I was the head of I was cataloger there. I was the head of the
Uh,
and it was the most fun ever. It was
you
my
thought it was
favorite
fun?
summer. Oh my gosh,
Only a cataloger would think it was
I
fun.
know. It was a cataloger's dream to yeah, and we moved about 200,000 books up the elevator or down the elevator, and oh, it was so much fun. Yeah. But
Okay. If you're
yeah.
not Kathy, it's not fun. Right? 'Cause you've got 200,000 books. They're dusty, they're dirty. You have to move every single one of them. Every single one has to be touched multiple times. You
Yes.
have to put a new barcode on it, but you got to do like a new class number. It's a ton of work. So I got there right at the end, like just in time to get the t-shirt and not do a whole lot of work because like that's the way to do it if you have to do it. Um, but we had two copies of a book. We had two copies of the autobiography of Christine Jorgensen, who was the first published memoir of a trans woman in like her popular publication. I see some nods, so you know this book. So that memoir, we had a copy downstairs in the basement in the R's, which is where we put things that are about medical conditions. And then we had a copy of the book up on the third floor in the HQs, which is where we put books about like the social life of or like social understandings of sex and sexuality and family and women and those kinds of things. And I was struck by that, right? Because I think the library, if we keep our eyes open and we're, not eyes open, but if we remain critical about what we're looking at, it's like full of interesting stuff that's just bizarre. And that when you think about it, it's like, well, I was like, well, how do we have the same book in two places? One was the original edition, and the second was from the early 2000s with a reissue with a historicizing essay by Susan Stryker. And so I was struck by how far apart they were, because in our library, I don't know about your libraries or other buildings you've been in, the library, like the elevator was terrible, and you had to wait forever. And so there was like it was a real problem to have books separated like that. And so I was really struck by that and trying to understand how that works. And so I wrote an article that I think is 2013 called Querying the Catalog, Queer Theory and the Politics of Correction, trying to make sense of that. And I'm interested in it not just as a cataloging and classification problem, but also um, as a teaching problem. So how do I teach people to use systems that have exclusions built into them, that have bias built into them? Another example, that library with the reclass project. So you're porting everything over to Library of Congress. So you're using their subject headings rather than the Dewey headings. And, we never had enough technical services workers. I've been in the field for 25 years. I've not once ever been anywhere where a cataloger quit or retired or got fired and they hired another one. And maybe that's just me, but like it just never happens. And so you don't have the people to be able to make the system like really work. So we had trace headings in the system for Negro women, African American women, Black women, and there was a fourth one, four. And that meant that you literally have to work four times as hard to retrieve articles about African American women than you would about white women who actually like they're not even named, right? It's just women is white. Um, and so like how do I teach that system, right? So I want to both teach you how to retrieve things so that you can get your 5 peer-reviewed articles about wound care so you can pass your class because that's a priority for me. But I also want you to understand that the system is built by humans, and those humans who have the authority to build those systems have like a certain way of seeing the world that systematically excludes you, which you know if you're systematically excluded by it. So this has been the sort of intellectual and practical problem that has like occupied me for 2 decades, right? I had a professor once who said, just have one question and let that guide your career. So I've tried to go with that. So fast forward to what, like 4 years ago, and there was a call out for who wants to run for president of the American Library Association. And in the intervening years, I'd been through a lot that had convinced me that library workers matter, that we do some of the most important work on the planet, not just in the person to person, kind of like I help you find those 5 wound care articles, but also the work that we do to sustain public institutions and the public good. We're like think about who in your town has as their whole job to help you out when you walk in the door and help solve your problem. I mean, it's us, right? We're the only ones in town who just want to help you. And that's such important work. But we don't do it well when our working conditions make it hard to do. So, right, like working conditions for librarians can be very, very challenging. I visited 31 states and 7 countries in my 2 years as president-elect and then president of the association. And everywhere I went, I saw people working with way less than they needed to do jobs that were much larger than they should have had to do. So I was like, well, what if ALA, the American Library Association, was an association for us, the people who work in libraries? And what if we use the tools inside of the association to build a profession where we had what we needed to do the best work that we can do, given how important the work is? I'm an organizer, I'm a labor person. I believe in the power of library workers to make the world better, but I think we can only do that when we're hooked together. So I'm always looking for sort of structures through which we can organize ourselves and each other towards the ends that we want. So the American Library Association is 150 years old in a couple of years. It's got 50,000 members. It's the oldest, largest library association in the world. And it has all of this power in it, meaning material stuff that we can use if we want to make the field the kind of field where we can do our best work. Because I'm assuming you all entered the program because there's something you want to do in libraries, right? You know, you want a stable salary and benefits. That's why I went. And you want to be able to make some good thing happen on the planet. And so what do we need to do to make that happen? So I ran for president of the association on a sort of worker focused, worker forward organizing platform. Um, my girlfriend, who I love very much and have a very good relationship with, was like, "You're never going to win." She was like, "They're never going to vote for an obvious organizing left lesbian. It's just never going to happen. They're just not going to win." So there was like, I'm not going to win. So, but I did think I would take the opportunity of the campaign to raise that story a little bit, tell it a little more publicly, like we're the most important people on the planet, and we need you to support us so we can do that good work. And then, much to everybody's surprise, I think, including the associations, I ended up winning the day. You know why I won? I made more phone calls. Like that's the organizing trick. You win when you call more people. That's it. There's no secret other than that. You talk to more people than the other guy, you're going to win. So I learned that in labor, and it's true, period. And I'm living proof. So then I'm elected president. I'm very excited. I tweet excitedly because I was big on like into Twitter. And wow, I'm less into it now, but I was big into Twitter. And I was like, I can't believe a Marxist lesbian who believes that power can be built and wielded on behalf of the public is the next president of the American Library Association. And so I see some smiles, so you know what happened after that. So it's like the right has a thing, an alert for anytime you have marks and anything about sexuality linked together. And this is old school, right? Like this is, we know this throughout history that the gay communists are the ones that they really don't like. Because frankly, dykes get work done, we just do. Like really everywhere I've ever been, right? Like who's the one buying the whistles and making the phone calls and getting the spreadsheet together, you know? And I don't know if there are other queer people in the room, but if there are, you know what I mean. You know what I mean. So that was really challenging because it happened in a moment when there was and still is, right, a lot of pushback against what we do as librarians. And that's cast a lot as like pushback against queer materials in the library, like gay stories. Um, but it's also pushback against queer people. I think we have to understand the current censorship crisis is like the same kind of attack and assault as attacks on gender affirming healthcare, you know, attempts to restrict our ability to buy cakes at a bakery if we want to get married, all that kind of stuff is all in the same kind of boat. Um, so they say that, I had intended to be like the pro-labor president, and they say that the presidency selects you. You don't choose your presidency, the presidency chooses you. For me, that was really true. Um, it ended up being a presidency that's where I spent a whole lot of time talking about censorship, which, while a huge library issue, I think also, you know, crowds out our ability to talk about the issues that I think are more of us are facing on any given day in our libraries. While right-wing attacks on our right to read are a huge problem, the fact that I've never been in a library without a bucket under a leak is another big problem. The fact that we've got librarians, like I talked to a librarian in Charleston, South Carolina, who worked with his staff. They worked one-on-one with community members who were unable to access eviction assistance protection funds during the pandemic. So what did you need to be able to access those funds to keep you in your home? You needed an email, you needed a computer, you needed an internet connection, and you needed an email. So if you're a policymaker, you don't know anybody who doesn't have an email address. If you work in a public library, a ton of people don't have email addresses, right? So they're spending hours with people trying to keep them from losing their homes. His staff were devastated by what they were seeing. I find this idea of moral injury really helpful, like what it does to a person to be witness to and party to a devastating moral failure, which is what like leaving people to lose their homes in a pandemic is, right? And so everybody worked way more than they should have to be able to like keep people in their homes. And that's both a story about how amazing and wonderful and brilliant librarians are, and also a story about a complete collapse of a social safety net and the sort of reduction of services to the tiny, tiny little tiny pin that is the library. And you've got the whole weight of the world sort of sitting on top of it. So those were the kinds of stories I wanted to tell so that we could get more support for library workers. And it ended up being very much a censorship year, and a year where people ended up talking about me a lot more than I ever want to be talked about, and more than I wanted to be talked about. So I will say that I regret the tweet because of the way that it derailed, in many ways, uh, what I had planned to do. Although they were always going to find the query in the catalog article where I'm very clear that I'm a big old gay, and that was just always going to be a problem. And so, I'm still, as you can tell, I'm just 2 months out, so I'm still starting to process what just happened. Um, I do think, though, that what I learned was that I was right about what ALA can do, and I was right about what associations can do. I'm right about that, right? It's so good to see everyone here for an ALA chapter meeting, because these are the structures through which we organize for the world that we want. So when I think about the resources ALA had, yes, they have money, yes, they have those kinds of things, but how hard is it to schedule a meeting when everybody can meet? Like, is it hard to send the doodle and then not everybody can, you got to send another one and it's like a lot of work? ALA does that work for you, right? There's a regularly scheduled meeting. Somebody has the Zoom code. There's a person whose job it is to find a time that works for everybody. So it's little, not, those aren't little things. They're mundane things, but they're absolutely crucial to the kind of organizing that I think we want to do if this is going to be a sustainable profession for those of us who want to work in it. I love it. I hope that you are learning to love it at Emporia State. The question for me is how do we make that job that we love a job that can support us, that we can thrive in, where we are not witness to some of the worst disasters that come with sort of unchecked disinvestment in the public. And so that's my ongoing project. I am immediate past president for this year, so I continue on the ALA executive board, and I'm providing support to Cindy Hole, who I think spoke with you last year, maybe. She's the current president of ALA, and her focus is on issues related to indigeneity and to ensuring equitable access to information for everyone. And so supporting her in that work, which is not easy. It's not easy to be a woman of color in a field that is as white as it is and as white as it always has been. And there's a reason those numbers aren't changing, and there's a culture there that we need to shift. And she's doing important work in that direction. And I'm dedicated to supporting her for this year. So I said I wasn't going to talk for a long time, and then I just went and talked for a really long time. So I'll stop there. That's sort of my story and my story with ALA. And if you're not a member, join right now because your student membership is the best deal in libraries you will ever get. So get it. And I would love to take any questions or answer, tell you any stories that you'd like to hear from me. So Zipporah, I'll turn it back to you. Guthrie,
Hey, thank you so much for sharing that with us. I'm just curious since I'm brand new to libraries, and I
welcome.
don't know much about the labor structure. You said you had a background in organizing, and I'm just curious what the relationship with the ALA and librarian unions is like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in 2016, I was sitting at my desk on the Wednesday before Labor Day, and I got an email from my colleague Ed, who was working, he was on the bargaining committee of our union at Long Island University's Brooklyn campus. And I got an email and he said, Emily, I think we're going to get locked out. And I was like, I don't have any idea what a lockout is. I was always like, if there was a union, I was in it, but I didn't know much. So I called my girlfriend, who's been wrong exactly twice in our relationship. One, she didn't think I was going to win. And second, she said, they're not going to lock you out. They never lock people out in higher ed. Like that's the thing you do to longshoremen. But sure enough, on Friday, we got an email that said you're locked out. The failure to accede to the demands of management meant that uh, we lost our job. So if a strike is we withhold our labor, a lockout is when management fires everybody. So we didn't get paid. Our health insurance was cut off immediately. We couldn't go on campus. We couldn't access our email. We couldn't access our like the course shell that we had. They waited until everybody had put their syllabi and set up their courses in Blackboard. And then they hired like random people. They used monster.com to hire random people to like teach your class. They redeployed administrators into classes. The best and slash worst was when they put the dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, who was an 88-year-old trained biologist. He was put in to teach the modern dance class that was normally led by an Alvin Ailey like company dancer. So, I have a robust critique, of course, of everything, but one is of the way that we have reduced higher education to simply credentialing, and the student becomes a customer who pays for a degree that then they turn into a corporate job. I mean, that's not what we're here for, right? We're here to talk about ideas and we're here to think together. Uh, and yeah, they had like, but that did mean that customers were like, are you kidding me? I didn't pay tuition to be taught by this guy. Like I came for this dancer. And so it was an intense experience for me. And it was my first experience of having like brute force power like wielded against me. I've been very lucky and sheltered in my life until that point. I had not experienced that before. And I was like, oh, the only way we're going to win is if all of us are together. Because there are always going to be more of us than there are of the people who would oppress us, right? There's always going to be more of us. That's how it works. So we organized, and that meant we had a list of every single person who worked in the library and or on the camp in the faculty. We had actions. We had a campaign of rising actions where we got people to do everything from like walking around with a picket sign, yes, but also coming together to sign each other up for unemployment insurance, like helping with like health insurance issues. Like we had somebody whose husband was dying of lung cancer, and they were like, we don't care about that. That was what the boss said. Anyway, so I learned a lot about how we build collective power, like their techniques, their strategies. ALA is not a union, right? It's a professional association. And in fact, it's organized such that the legal line is that we can't be pro-union because of our 501c3 tax status. I'll tell you because I'm in a room of friends that I don't believe that analysis correct, but like that's the kind of thing I just didn't have time to like work on. But like ask me in 5 years if that's still the policy. So what ALA does have is an allied professional association that does do some training around union stuff, but not a lot. But what it is an organization full of library workers. So maybe it can't be like what the law says is that we can't be a bargaining agent. Like I don't want to be a bargaining agent, but I do want to be like the kind of association that can share information widely with library workers about what I believe is one of the best ways to get the wages and working conditions that we want, which is pushing for them and organizing for them collectively. But ALA is agnostic on that because there are many libraries, many members who are not pro-union. There are a ton of library managers, like all of that. But I think what's similar is that you've got a structure in through which you can organize and a whole lot of people in one place at one time. So I don't know if that answers your question, but okay, great. Is it Johns? Is that how I say your name?
It is, yes. Hi, Emily. Thank you so much
Hi.
for talking to us today. Um, I'm wondering if you could speak to like the sort of the drive for like neutrality within the public library system, the idea that like we're supposed to have like all sorts of viewpoints and all sorts of perspectives expressed. Um, when I think you're a great person to ask this question because I think you know firsthand that like that is something that we say and that's not always something that we put into practice.
Mhm.
And it's also something that like I've struggled with because like there are certain things that like generally around the world there are certain like texts that are considered like hateful. Like I think about like I've had to like because I've worked in libraries for 5 years.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, academic and public. I'm actually at work right now. Everyone upstairs is cursing me for not being upstairs right now. Um, but it's like I've had to check out Mein Kampf to people, and that's something
Yeah,
that like we're supposed to keep in the library. But for example, like anything by Marx, we would keep only online, if at all.
yeah.
So I think about stuff like that and like the sort of the expectations that we're supposed to be neutral when we live in a world where political neutrality is not only impossible, but like it doesn't make sense, I think, for ALA's mission with the lobbying that public libraries and other library associations do. So I'm just wondering, like, your thoughts on the idea of like having all perspectives or having that sort of like neutral state of opinion when at the same time like as libraries like we have to advocate for ourselves in order to get our funding, in order to get our staffing, in my case like a way bigger building that we really need. Just curious your thoughts on all of that.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great question and a preoccupying question for me for sure, because there's a hard limit as to what we'll accept in the field. And it stops at Marxist lesbian, right? Like that's it. Like that's as far as you can go, right? And I was surprised by that, just because when I say I'm a Marxist, right, all I mean is that I believe history is the story of capital and labor. Like essentially, that's all I mean. And like, I also prefer cats to dogs. No offense or netta, but like, there's just like things that are like we're about, right? Um, but I think like what I love about libraries is that there's nothing abstract in here. It's all material, right? So I could have like a theoretical thing about how gender, like understandings of gender have changed over time. But in the library, the book is in one place and another place, and I want them together, and there's no way to do that because of the way the system works. So it's material. So sometimes I feel like the conversation is like, should we be neutral or not? Is it good or is it bad? When like all of it, frankly, really depends on the context. So there are places in this country right now that can't put a book on the shelf about a gay penguin, and they're relying on the belief that we must have something for everyone in the library. They're relying on that principle to be able to make the argument that gay penguins also deserve to have representation in the library, right? So they're relying on that principle to make an argument. I so like I think sometimes neutrality is a principle that we stick to because it's rhetorically useful for us. But I agree with you. There's no way to be neutral because like I've got a limited budget and I could, if I buy this, if I buy Mein Kampf, I can't buy Capital, right? So I've got to do like I got to make decisions. So it isn't that we don't make decisions. It's just that the decisions that we make are should not be political in the sense that I'm not making a decision. I'm not making a judgment about a book about whether it's good or it's bad. I'm making a judgment of book, like, do I have an audience for this? So I met with a librarian in New Mexico, Red River Rouge something, I forget. Anyway, small town in New Mexico, and he said he had somebody come in and say, I have this list of books that you need to get out of the library. And he looked at the list and looked at her and was like, what are you talking about? You're a homeschool mom. You're here all the time. Like, you can't be attacking the library in this way. What's really going on? And talked to her about it. And he was like, is there anything you want in the library rather than out of the library? Right. And she gave him a list of 5 to 10 books that like I would never read and I feel are, like produce a world I don't want. And he bought 2 or 3 of them because it keeps her in the library. The other thing I'll say is that what makes durable public institutions that don't fall apart, is that everybody uses them, right? So everything has gone away except like Social Security, right? Because we all get that, not all of us, but you know what I mean? Like it's a program for everybody. So I think if the library is for everybody, there's a better chance that it won't collapse because of somebody, you know? Um, but yeah, like you're always like, if you're in a public institution, you got to have something for everybody. I do kind of think that, but I think, I like there's this one of the stories that I found most devastating during my term was in Boundary County, Idaho. Kimber Glidden gets run out of town by armed anti-library, anti-gay, like Christian nationalists who like the language they use in board meetings about how like the judgment is coming for you, really intense. But they would like park outside of her house with guns, and she just finally like she left the position, and she hasn't been able to find a position in a library since. She hasn't been able to find a position in Boundary County. She's across the border and works in a hospital in Spokane in medical billing, night shift, right? Like destroyed her life. And she'll tell you they came in with that list of 500 books, and she was like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't have a single one of those books in my collection. So it both demonstrates the absurdity of these coordinated censorship attacks, but also, Kimber, why don't you have those books in your collection? Right? Like that's a form of censorship also. And how many decades of no books about gay life? There's like we're dealing with 150 years of censorship, you know, Black queer stories, like we didn't have any of them until a minute ago. So yeah, so I don't know, it's complicated and it depends, which is probably not satisfying. Um, Checking the time. Sarah. Hi.
Um, so from your what you've said so far, you have a background in academic librarianship.
Hmm.
So something that I've kind of noticed, and I wanted to know if you've noticed this as well, but it seems like there's a decrease in emphasis on the liberal arts in uh, colleges and universities.
Hmm.
And that is something that Emporia State also has some
Oh,
issues on, in my opinion.
what's
Uh,
happening at Emporia?
oh, it was a couple years ago. They fired tenured professors.
Mhm. 33,
Yeah.
all in mostly liberal arts professors.
I was gonna say it's probably nobody in the business school or
There was like one
entrepreneurship.
science professor,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
But
Gosh.
yeah.
Okay.
But I wanted to know if you've noticed that as well, which from your body language, I think you might have. Uh, but and how that's affected like librarianship in that context.
Yeah, it's everywhere. I think there's a single playbook that they're playing from, right? Like, so when they locked us out, that administration after locking us out, and then we got back in, and then we signed a bad contract, and then whatever, it's like a long, boring. I don't think it's boring, but it's a long story. But then the next thing that they did was cut philosophy. You can't major in philosophy anymore. Can't major in economics, can't major in any languages, collapsed all of those disciplines into a general humanities program, took anthropology, sociology, history, social sciences program, and that's it. But infinite like shades of entrepreneurship, digital entrepreneurship, whatever, like marketing degrees. And like I find it devastating because that's not happening at elite private colleges. So it's always been the case, right, that only some of us get the luxury of reading and writing and thinking, but now that's getting even smaller. So I'm at CUNY. So far so good at Queens College, but the first email we got welcoming us to the semester from the dean was like, enrollment's down in our disciplines and we need everybody to get students in the seats. When like the problem is that there's one story about what college is for that just like gets you a job, and it you can, but doesn't have to. So what is the right? And like most jobs I've had as somebody with a college degree have involved a lot of reading and writing, It's like those are skills that we want people to have. Um, I think for academic libraries, the problem is deeper than that. I don't think that people believe that academic libraries do anything. I don't think that they think they matter or are important. So I don't know if people have been following the story at Western Illinois University, where the administration fired every single librarian, all of them, all of them. And when people pushed back and said, "What? There's no librarian there," he said, "Some of those, the dean has a library degree." And I'm like, well, the dean hasn't shown you how to do a hanging indent or like fix the stapler or like used Cinol to find 5 peer-reviewed articles about wound care, which, as you can probably tell, is a class I taught 8 times a semester for a decade. Like that dean has not done any of that. And everything is online. So these fundamental things that we do in libraries, which is what? From where I sit, we select, acquire, describe, circulate, and preserve information. Like that's what we do. Um, People don't see any of that as important anymore. They imagine that nobody has to select it. And I got to tell you, so I spent my whole career as an academic librarian. This semester, I start as a full-time professor, and I'm putting together my syllabus using the library catalog. It's terrible. It's so hard to use. And I can see how somebody who didn't work in a library would be like, that library can't do anything right. But the problem is, like I said before, they haven't hired a technical services librarian in that library for 20 years. So they don't have anybody who knows how to implement Alma, you know, like carve out for the next time I meet with you and we talk about Alma and how I feel about that. But that I think is the bigger problem for libraries. And, you know, I think if like I do think there's like less of a respect for books and reading if like your degree program is just about like Excel spreadsheets. And not to say there's nothing to learn in your entrepreneurship program, but you don't use the library a lot in that program, you know, and I think that's a real problem. Has Emporia State, has it recovered? Because the other thing is they make these cuts and it never does the thing that they thought it was going to do, you know.
Yeah, enrollment. So I think it was to ostensibly to cut costs.
Mhm.
Uh, and it ended up cutting like the Master of English program, which I was also applying for, but
Oh, I'm
you know.
sorry.
Uh,
Yeah.
and they also cut like the Master of Music, music education, one of which was all
History.
online, history, at least like one of
Really?
the programs in history, but it just like then I
Yeah.
think that there was like a professor that left because you don't want to like stick around if you know what's coming, you know. But they've tried to get enrollment back up by having like choral scholarships. I'm located in Emporia. I work at the
Okay.
college too, so I have a bit of an on-campus presence. So they've tried to get enrollment back up and they've decreased tuition and uh, have a lot of scholarships for like arts programs to get people to enroll in the school in general, I think. Which it's nice that people are getting scholarships. And I think,
Yeah.
but they cut their funding in the first place, you know? And
Thank you. Yeah, I mean this president who locked us out, I remember I'll never forget our first faculty meeting and she was talking about her vision for revamping the curriculum and somebody stood up and was like the chair of the history department stood up and asked a question about like her support for history and she said, and I'll never forget it, chill, and I should have known what was coming. History will continue to be funded as long as it can demonstrate that it is relevant. I was like, what? Like, we would benefit from some historical understanding of the conditions in which we find ourselves now. And I wish the college administrators would take a little more seriously the like drumbeat of you get this degree, you'll get a job, and what that has meant for like gutting student interest. Like I have a teenager. He's just started his junior year. He's like thinking about college and he mostly wants to go get high and snowboard in Calgary. That's his like current vision. But like when he's not on that track, he's definitely thinking about what I can do for a job. And he lives with me. I'm a librarian. My partner, Karen, is a historian. We both are very like life of the mind people. He's got all that around him. And it's still the drumbeat of the degree needs to be useful, as if it isn't useful to understand something about how we came to live in a world that is like this one, which is full of inequity and not what we want. Yeah. It's nice also to just be in this room and be able to just talk as myself. That's the other downside of being ALA president, though I would highly recommend it if you're thinking about it, but you do speak for the association. So it's nice to get my own thoughts back. Anyway. Yeah, but thanks for the question. It's the crisis of our times, and to my mind, a bigger one than censorship. Anybody else have a question or a comment?
there's a chat that Arnetta sent. Um, College administrators tend to not be academics anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, it used to be your historian became the dean. Yeah, and now it's they hire deans. It's like a special skill set.
We're more of a business.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
I'll
will
just
say though, when we're talking about enrollment, Slim, the library school, we're up.
Yeah.
I mean, we're thriving and it's which is really exciting.
Queens
So
College too, it's thriving.
yeah.
But all the
So
more important to make these programs spaces for that kind of critical inquiry that's maybe missing in other parts of the university.
yeah. Now, so It's where you teach, is it all face to face? Or do you have
It's
an
a
online, or is it on an online program or?
it's a mix.
Okay.
So it's not fully online. So there are in-person classes. Although you could patchwork together a class um that was all online.
Mhm.
Oh, Sarah, yeah, the terrible stuff going on with censorship in Idaho. It's just devastating. Do folks know about the new law in Idaho?
No.
Sarah, do you want to share it?
It's, I think, HB 710. So basically at Coeur d'Alene Public Library, um, they have created you have to get a special card saying that you are like 18 and over. They have an actual area where children can't go. Um, and Idaho, well, Coeur d'Alene has really turned into just a hellscape
Oh,
for
yeah.
anyone with any type of intelligence, or I mean, I could say a lot of really terrible stuff, but and it has had that history, unfortunately, of white supremacy happening in northern Idaho.
When I
um
grew up, though, when I was growing up there, though, they were separatists.
yeah,
They went
right.
into the wilderness and
They were
hid,
just like a group of 20 gross weirdos that would just do their parade down the street,
but they
you know.
didn't have,
And
they
yeah,
didn't seek and claim state power,
yes,
which is what
right.
they do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the library is really suffering now. I used to work there a long time ago before they had their new building. And it was just a wonderful library, wonderful community. I mean, there's a ton of homeschoolers there, so I don't want to say anything too negative about homeschooling, but there's a lot of benefits to it, and I can see, some of the trends. But um, I just can't understand what's happening. It just seems to completely defy all rationality. So,
Mhm.
but yeah, look into it. If you can look into it. I know it's happening in other states too. So,
The
yeah, it's
law
bad
in
news.
Idaho, yeah, and the law in Idaho says that if someone comes in and asks you to move a book from the children's section to the adult section,
They have a form.
yeah, you have to do that, or you're
Yeah.
subject to a $250 fine,
Yes. Yes.
which I find ridiculous because it is both a comically small amount of money for the state budget, but it could be the entire collections budget of a small rural library in Idaho.
Yeah, and or if like as a staff member, somebody who's getting paid to be there for part-time, like
Yeah.
why would you even bother trying to help anyone? Because you'd be so scared, like I don't want to get this fine. I make, what is it, $10 an hour or something in Idaho. I don't know. So yeah, it's really a bad trend. I don't know how Idaho gets out of this. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
know.
And it's not by accident. There's been a concerted movement to settle northern Idaho to make it an extremist state.
Yeah.
And I think that like when we talk about getting organized, they're really organized.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So
It's
Kimber was telling
terrifying.
me, yeah,
Yeah.
about the Red Doubt movement, which has been like it's people in Massachusetts intentionally
Yeah.
settling parts of the rural West.
Yeah. Yeah.
Guthrie?
I don't want to change the topic if other people want to keep discussing that, but just in the little time we had left, I wondered your experience as ALI president with sort of the increasing needs of urban libraries towards like human services. I just know I live in Portland and our downtown metro seems like very overwhelmed with the
Mhm.
needs of the constituents, beyond just library resources. And I just wondered what the national conversation is like around that.
It's intense. It's like we are at breaking point and can't do more. That we cannot be the only safety net for the community.
Right.
But it's one thing to say that and believe that, and another thing to close your door, or to kick someone out or to refuse to help. Um, but I do think it's why my last sort of pitch in our last few minutes would be that it's why we have to both do everything we can to make the library a robust, well-funded space and all of those things, but we also need to be involved where we can in efforts to improve services in our cities. So that means voting, right? It means getting involved in local elections. And that's, both to be on the school board to prevent book banners from taking over, but it also means like there's a guy named Nicholas Quach, I think he's Vietnamese American, he's 20 or something, and he ran as a teenager to be part of his library board, and he is now running like easily the biggest, most visible um, campaign for the water board in Southern California, in his Southern California town that I've ever seen. And I think I love it because it's like the water board makes decisions about how much our water costs and whether or not we keep it clean and do we invest in better pipes. And so if we want those things, we need people to run for those things, and water board is not a full-time job. Any of us could do it. But I think we have to uh, get ourselves and our neighbors uh, to get involved in the kind of organizing work that it'll take to turn the page on some of the. And I say that, and I hear people saying, but I'm already so tired from work. Well, let me tell you, the only thing that will keep you from just being devastated by the world is organizing with other people to make it better. It's just like I know it's a lot of work and I don't want to go to a meeting, but go to a few of them, go with a friend so you're not on your own. Like definitely bring someone with you that's entertaining. I just signed the paperwork yesterday to be treasurer of a political action committee for like to assess candidates in New York City on their library, and like I don't know, whatever. I'll see how it goes. Um, I've never been the money guy before, so I'm kind of excited about it. But like to the extent that we're able to, we have to see movements for improving the lives of others is like essential to any kind of, because people be like, well, let's hire a social worker. And it's like, okay, now you have one social worker and everything that comes with people who feel criminalized by social workers, so they won't use them. And it's like it's not enough. So we're just spitting in the wind unless we have a real change in what our country looks like. Um, yeah. So
Thank you
that's,
so much.
yeah, you're welcome. It's such a great pleasure. And I'm really glad that you reached out, Zipporah, and it's really just been great to talk with you all tonight. And I know there's a pitch for the organization. I love how many Idahoans are in the room.
Yeah. Emily, this has been great.
Good. I'm so glad.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this.
Yeah, it was really fun to meet you all. And I don't know if Becca or Zipporah, if you wanted to say something else, but I will sign off for now. Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Hey,
Have a great
Emily.
night.
Fun.